episodes of the Book of Boba Fett are now streaming on Disney+, the latest show in the Star Wars canon. This continues the story of Boba after we left him off in Mando Season 2. At the end of that season, he took over the throne of Jabba the Hutt and killed Bib Fortuna, essentially making him the daimyo of Tatooine. However, this comes with some consequences because it turns out a lot of other families in the area are like, hey, we've been on this place for a while and we don't quite like you as a new leader, and so there's going to be some, disputes as a result of that. And in an attempt to bring the families together and the syndicate, which is coming in to trade spice and to maybe cause a war on Tatooine, Boba tries to bring everyone together and essentially try and become the people's favorite of sorts. Before we go any further, there are going to be full spoilers in this review throughout the entire season. I'm going to talk about it all because there's no way I can talk about this show without addressing key plot points and certain things that happen in it. It's borderline impossible to talk about it without those. So if you haven't seen the Book of Boba Fett yet, even the season finale, I'm going to talk about all of those things. So without further ado, here we go. The first 3 episodes essentially focus on the build-up to Boba before we saw him again in The Mandalorian. He's definitely had a while getting to this point, especially with the fact that 5 years have passed since the events of Return of the Jedi. When he first is introduced in this season, we see him in a Bacta tank reliving certain memories of his, and we see him get out of the Sarlacc pit. He eventually gets taken in by Tusken Raiders, and he is being held as a prisoner until he eventually starts to help them out a bit more, eventually helping them with their trade routes, especially with spice runners that are going by and trying to target them and kill them. And all of that stuff is interesting. It was a bit slow though. A lot of people have made note of the fact that the first 3 episodes don't really do much, especially when it's focused a lot more in flashbacks and in terms of telling stories while Boba is in a Bacta tank. There's not a lot of stuff happening in the present, and so there's a lot of different times where we'll see things happening before rather than happening in the present. I'm going to be completely honest with you, the first 3 episodes, even I thought that was an issue. However, there's no denying the fact that I was invested in the story. I thought it was a very interesting tale that they were telling, and Tamira Morrison was excellent in it. I think they did a really great job of basically making him more sympathetic. Because the truth of the matter is, up until recently, Boba Fett was a character who you saw in the same vein as someone like Captain Phasma in the sequels, and it was like, cool, this is a character that looks cool but doesn't really do anything. And that's kind of how I ended up feeling about Boba Fett for the longest time. He even goes out very easily in Return of the Jedi. And so the pop culture has made him this sort of icon that now when you look back on it, it's like, whoa, okay, now we quite like him. And now people want to see more of him. And so I found myself actually caring more about Boba's character now than I ever did before. And you couple that with the writing and the performance and you have yourself quite a winner. Same thing goes for Fennec Shand. Now, I always liked Fennec Shand, but I like her a lot more in this, and that's also because of, well, the way that she's been developed and she's been, performed. Ming-na Wen is excellent in it. The 2 leads, honestly, in this, the 2 main leads are both extraordinary. And I think they bring a lot of great presence to the entire show in general. I thought Fennec for a while, however, was not getting much to do. The first 3 episodes are not her. But when she eventually gets focused in episode 4, I thought, all right, now we're getting somewhere. And I really liked her character developed as well, how she has come to accept the fact that this is the life that they're now going to be going down towards, something a little more righteous and making something for themselves rather than being hired to do different jobs across the galaxy. And the relationship that develops between her and Boba Fett is really, really cool. I really liked all of that stuff. However, like I said, the first few episodes are fine if you are somebody who was expecting something more in the present, because there's not a lot of that. But if you're somebody who was really liking the story that they were telling up until that point, then I think you'd be pretty happy with what those episodes have to offer. So for the most part, yes, I liked the initial setup to the season. Then eventually you came back into the present, all the stuff with the Bacta tank was over, and I thought, okay, we're in the present now. We're gonna have ourselves a war with the Pike Syndicate. They're all coming in to basically take out Boba and the rest of the families and Tatooine, and so we're gonna have some great stuff happen. And at the end of the 4th episode, there's basically a call to arms. Like, we need muscle. We need people to take on the Syndicate if a war does, if the possibility of a war becomes a thing. And then we went to episode 5. Now, the last 3 episodes are the ones that people are going to talk about the most, and we may as well do that. So, episode 5 starts off, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, I might add, and this time we're introduced to Mando. Pedro Pascal himself shows up, and this is entirely his episode, which I was really surprised by. I knew that was going to happen to a degree because I remember watching Mando season 2 and thinking there's no way we don't get Mando and Boba Fett in your show as well, because if Boba's going to show up over here, there's going to be some connection that's going to be established. And we get an entire episode. In fact, almost 2. I'll talk more about episode 6 in a second, but episode 5's entire arc, where we see him eventually talk to the armor and Paz Vizsla, and then eventually have that confrontation in which he loses being a Mandalorian, at least in that creed, and eventually move on to try and, find something else different, another purpose in life. That entire episode is absolutely magnificent, spectacularly shot as well. And I mentioned Bryce Dallas Howard being the director because she's a damn good director. And the 3 episodes that she's directed in Star Wars, this was the best of the lot. I can't wait to see what else she does. I mean, she is a magnificent director, and she really takes after her dad. I have to say that. Like, Ron Howard has done some amazing stuff in the past. You can tell there's that flair over there. In some cases, maybe even better. So I really liked that 5th episode. I liked finding the Naboo starfighter and modifying it to Mando's needs. Eventually, him taking it for a spin around the... that was the pod racing track, right? Like, that's the same one from Phantom Menace. Like, it really felt like that. So he eventually takes it around takes it on a spin. I thought it was really, really fun. So yes, really great episode 5. However, we don't see Boba in this at all. We don't get him even for a second. We get a name drop at the very end when Fennec shows up to talk to Mando about basically fighting with the Syndicate. But we don't see Boba in it. Now, this is something that a lot of people have brought up as well. The idea of how Boba is not really in episodes 5 and 6. In fact, until the season finale, which just saw and just aired, he doesn't even have dialogue for 2 whole episodes. He shows up for 1 second in episode 6. And a lot of folks have said that, hey, a show called The Book of Boba Fett, the best episodes over here so far are the ones that have nothing to do with Boba Fett. What the hell is going on with that? And that's true. Definitely a negative that you can have towards the show itself is that why are the most interesting parts of the season so far having nothing to do with the main character? That could be a flaw with the writing, that could be a flaw with the execution, but here's how I saw it. Yes, this is a connector piece to the rest of the Star Wars universe. They set it up that way even in the interviews, apparently. They called it Mando 2.5 to an extent, which it definitely feels like, especially the back half of the season. However, a lot of the decisions and a lot of things that characters have eventually rippled into, like what they're doing right now, are a direct result of things that have happened with Boba Fett. In a lot of ways, he's been involved with so much of what has happened with these characters and these characters' lives. And that especially goes into episode 6, because when we finally see Cobb Vanth again, he doesn't have the armor. As you know, he had the Boba Fett armor, and then eventually he lost it in the season 2 of Mandalorian, and then he's without it now. And he would have really used it because later on in the episode, something crazily insane happens and Cad Bane shows up. Yes, from the Clone Wars and even recently from the Bad Batch. We get to see this character in live action form, which was a huge moment for a lot of fans. And honestly, kind of unbelievable, the fact that that was even happening. But when he shows up, he shoots down Vanth pretty easily because it's like, hey, you didn't have your armor, and plus it's Cad Bane. The guy does not miss. And seeing that visual was insane in itself. And then eventually you see that ripple effect has transcended all the way to this point. So I think it's very interesting, and Boba being a former student of Cad Bane, all of that is a result of this character. So it's like he's not there, but it still feels like he had an effect on it. Like he still had somewhat of an impact on everything that's happening. But let's talk more about episode 6 because we have to. Seeing Luke try to train Grogu in the ways of the Jedi, him building the temple with these droids, which looks eerily like the temple that burns down in The Last Jedi, seeing all of those things come together was really, really cool. And seeing Ahsoka again, Rosario Dawson, was pretty awesome as well. There was a lot of fan service in episode 6, and it was directed by Dave Filoni. And you could really tell this was directed by Dave Filoni. Like, this was the ultimate I can't believe this is happening fan episode for Star Wars. And yes, it's been called out for that. I found it very interesting how much of the show got called out. It's like every episode, really every episode, had something that was iffy for fans or audiences. Like something just bothered people at every turn. And I thought it was almost humorous to a point. Like I remember there was a complaint in episode 3 that the mods like Drash and Scad who were introduced, they have these colorful bikes that are very much like the bikes in American Graffiti, a George Lucas movie. And it felt like an homage to that. Some people pointed it out as being too goofy and too colorful and very Power Rangers-like in a Star Wars universe, especially somewhere like Tatooine. I thought, well, okay, and that it doesn't feel like Star Wars at all. That George Lucas would never do something like this, except he did do something like this. But there was a complaint in that, which I do kind of agree with, which was about the speed of the bikes. There's a chase sequence that happens, and you don't get a lot of, in terms of like mileage in terms of that. Like it just goes by at a very glacial pace. I thought about it, thought it was the environment. Like you can't really go fast in that space, but sure. Speed, I'll give it that. Especially towards the end when Drash just speedily skids to a halt. If you could do that the whole time, then why was it slow? But going back to episode 6, I really liked it, especially towards the end when Luke offers Grogu a choice. He says, hey, I can give you this lightsaber that my old master Yoda used to have, who you're very much like, and I could give you that, or I could give you this armor that Mando brought for you, this sort of mithril-like thing, and you can, choose that path. And the episode ends on a cliffhanger, and if you've seen the future Star Wars content, you know for a fact that Ben Solo is his first student. So you know Grogu's not going to stay on. And in episode 7, it starts off, Grogu's back on Tatooine, and he's there with Pele, played by Amy Sedaris, and they're reunited. It's a very funny, lovely moment. And eventually episode 7's war sequence commences, which is a lot of fun. Seeing the Rancor being in action, and the one that was tamed by Danny Trejo in that lovely cameo, was a lot of fun. And seeing that thing take on these massive droids that have come to destroy Mos Espa especially was really, really cool. Seeing all the characters actually involved in the action was great. Boba and Mando, the mods, Fennec Shand, back Chrysanthemum, who I haven't even talked about. Holy shit, you got Chrysanthemum in this. And all of those things coming together was a lot of fun. And throughout it, I just had this stupid grin on my face. Like I was loving what I was seeing. The confrontation that eventually happens between Boba and Cad Bane was also really, really cool. Although brief, and some have maybe assumed that Cad Bane is dead. Yeah, I don't think so. Especially when you see that little light blinking there. Like, I think he's still got some life left in him, because I don't think Cad Bane is going to go down that easily. Maybe just for the time being. But I think we're going to see him again very, very soon. I liked everything about that. It was a very fun finale. And yes, it definitely ends with a setup to what we're going to see in Mando Season 3. It makes sense. I didn't see a situation where Mando goes on without the kid, but I'm glad to see it. And seeing Grogu actually involved in the action at one point was really, really cool. So yeah, definitely a really great episode. Did I have flaws with Boba Fett overall? Yes, definitely. I think there are things that could have been bettered. I think there are moments with the writing that could have been a lot stronger. I think moments with the pacing could have been a lot stronger. But really, that is in the first half of the season. Eventually, the back half of it I thought was really, really great. But yes, in a 7-episode season, when it takes until episode 4 to really get to what's about to happen in the present day, after all the flashbacks, yes, it can definitely feel like we took a long time getting to that point. I thought it was very interesting that the entirety of my issues with this show come down to just the structure. And while I understand that anthology shows are a thing, hell, even the Clone Wars has an anthological approach to it, it still has a core story that follows through. Especially when you get to the Bad Batch later on in that season too, even though I didn't love it all the way, I still think that it had a structured narrative. Like, yeah, mission of the day stuff, sure, but it was consistency to it. Here, it just felt like we were dropped into a different show, especially in the second half. Now, granted, I keep going back to I still enjoyed it. I still think it was fun. I still thought the season finale was a lot of fun, and there's a lot to like in it. And there's some really great action, and there's some really great visuals to complement all of those things. Some really great moments with characters that really make it effective. I just wish there was a little more focus And I wish that there was a little more time to sort of understand how they wanted to tell this story. Overall, I'm still satisfied with what I got at the end of the day, but maybe next time a little more focus, just focus. That would be really, really great. But I'm going to end this review on a more positive note. I got to care more about Boba as a character. I mean, it's one thing to say that the best episode of it had nothing to do with Boba Fett, and you could say that that's an issue in terms of like the storytelling. But the fact that I was looking at that episode and thinking, I want to see more of Boba Fett, I feel like that itself says something, right? Like you wanted to see more of this character. I don't know. Maybe it's just the small victory aspect of that I did appreciate. And it's why I still think it's worth a watch. Although I'm kind of curious to see what fans think of it like once the hype dies down. Like just watch it like as its own bingeable season. Maybe you'll just like it, especially if you're like a casual fan or something like that. I feel like it's going to be an interesting one to talk about in like the days to come. I'm going to give the Book of Boba Fett Season 1 a B. So with the season finale premiered, what did you guys think of the Book of Boba Fett Season 1? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, let me know. Did you guys really like what it was doing? Did you not like it? What do you think could be better? Let me know accordingly. You guys are the best. Thank you very much as always for watching. If you like this, please do subscribe, and may the Force be with you.